Hello, guys. David Vose here. Beautiful day. It really is. It's misty, foggy. It's about 10:58 in the morning, and it's still a blanket of fog. It's gonna break out some sunshine later on this afternoon, they say. And then we're gonna get 2 or 3 days of sunshine. And boy, I'm gonna need it because I had some leaks on this roof that I did here in the cabin, and it's horrendous. So I have to get up there and put a roof on. I do have the aluminum roofing to do it that I got months back, and I never put it up there because I put this black tarp all over from the top of the cabin, trailer, everything, and it surrounds it, and it kept it warmer. It kept it from leaking, but when it got really heavy rain, it started leaking in a few places. So got to put that roof up Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, somewhere in there. And the way I made my porch was that during the summer, you get the sun coming up every morning, and you sit on the porch and you get to sunbathe. And it's just right straight on, and it's beautiful. But then when winter comes, the sun goes all the way over to the right, further south, and there's trees and things, so you really don't get much sun at all in the winter. So I'm going to build a staircase going up to the roof, and I'm going to build a deck on the roof. And that way, winter, spring, summer, or fall, all you got to do is call, and I'll be running. See you again. Of course, that's the sunshine coming, And it's going to be wonderful, beautiful. I got to make the stairs good enough, though, probably for the dogs to get up there. I really don't want them to miss out on all the sunshine. So I'm going to have to make some pretty nice stairs. I think I know where I'm going to put them. And a rail and all of that. And I hope to get that done this week, or it may take me several days. You know how things like that, projects like that could carry on several days. But I hope you're having a wonderful day, guys. It's a beautiful day where I am. And you know something? In spite of the fact that yesterday, I think it was yesterday, I spent all morning trying to get unstuck. The night before, I was heading out to town, and the back end slipped off into the ditch. And it was so slick, because this clay is slick, and it's like ice. It's not really big holes, or you wouldn't think it would be that bad of a road, even when it rains. But it's slick, and you just slide right down into the ditch, and then it does get soft, and you can't get out of there because you can't climb out because of the slickness. And so I was stuck there, and I was sideways in the road, and I was really worried somebody was going to come along and slam into me. There was nothing I could do. I didn't have any little orange, cones or anything. So it was late, and I went to bed, didn't know what to do. But I had to get up before dark to get out there so I could be there at crack of dawn so I could try to get that thing out. And here's the story, and this is the reason why I'm telling you the story, because it's kind of what I want to tell you about today, something I want to talk about. Another lesson that I've learned, really stacks lesson on lesson, just like open my mind to really see what's going on here. And I will never forget this. I believe now, the story might not make that much sense to some of you, but it makes a lot of sense to me. And for those of you who ever contemplated your life and things that happen and why, the coinkydinkiness of so many things, and why something has to happen right then and there when you don't need it the worst, and that kind of thing. So I got stuck, and I shouldn't have. I was being careless. I looked away, put on the brakes a little bit too much, and the back end came around. And it was just so slick, I couldn't get my back end to come out of that because it was just sliding. Now, if I'd have been paying attention, I wouldn't have gotten stuck. So there's the first coincidence, that I shouldn't have gotten stuck, but I did. It's for somebody who's a good driver and pays attention, I shouldn't have gotten stuck. but I did. Now, you could say, well, that's a coincidence. Okay, but there may be a reason that my higher consciousness was about to show me a lesson, teach me a lesson. I would say something I needed to work on. And I think we all probably need to work on this one. So listen to what I'm saying here. So there I was, and I thought, doggone it, I shouldn't have done that, and there's no way I'm getting out of here without a winch. Or somebody come along and pull me out. So next morning, get there crack at dawn, and here come the neighbor. Exactly as I walked up on my truck and opened the door, here come that neighbor. And this is the neighbor that we used to visit. And then we had a little episode with the tweaker that was coming up, and he's gone. The tweaker's gone. But the tweaker was going through my property and called the police on my dogs, and I had that whole episode. I don't know if some of you remember. Well, in that process, it kind of made me and the neighbor fall out, because I think the neighbor got mad at me, thinking that I was blocking off my trail up there on the top of the hill because of him. And he thought I was trying to walk on his property, and he put a sign as no trespassing. And then somebody called him and said, hey, that guy over there that is your neighbor put a fence across up the top of the hill. I have property goes over beyond the power line, on the other side of the power line. So you can make a fence across the power line if you own it and put a gate. And I did that. And that's legal, because these guys were coming up on their four-wheelers. And I had already talked to a guy down the road that said, yeah, they're not just driving by. They go up on the hill, on the cliff, and they look down and they see if you're home. And if you're not home, they're going to try and come and steal things. They're tweakers. Okay, we only had these two brothers of tweak, here for about one summer. They're gone. They haven't been here since. But they were here. And I thought, oh, no, you don't. I don't want you driving up there. Cross my property. Now, the law says they can cross your property as long as you don't have a fence. Or if you don't have a sign that says, get out. And I don't like signs like that. No trespassing, that kind of thing. Because I always assume that most people aren't going to trespass unless they have to. They got to walk by, whatever. You can walk by. I don't mind. Problem is, you walk by on my property, my dogs are going to bark at you. So they got mad that my dogs were barking at them on my property. So I put up the fence, and then they complained about that. Well, all of this got me anxious and probably upset. A little bit upset because it was they were coming down against my dogs, and they had called the police, and the police came out and said they were going to take one of my dogs. And I had a knockdown, drag-out fight with the sheriff. I said, this is my property. These are my dogs. You can't tell me how many dogs I'm going to have. What are you, from Grants? We're not in Grants. I'm out in the middle of nowhere. Okay, this is my road you're standing on. These are my dogs. And if you want to shoot one of my dogs, that's between you and the Lord. But I ain't doing it. I'm keeping my dogs. And unless you want to come up here and kidnap one of my dogs or shoot my dog, well, then we're done here. Because you have no jurisdiction here. Now, I know I was being a little upset and I was a little mad. And I don't normally act that way, but it really upset me because I said, are you going to do anything about these people going across my property? So then I think the police may have went and talked to the other guy or something with the wrong person. Anyway, it was a big thing. And last time I went over drove up in my neighbor's yard to tell him about, see if he was okay, because I hadn't heard from him. I said something about, well, we're friends. He said, I don't want no friends. And his wife wouldn't even come out and say hello. And he was basically, I got to go. And, and he was saying he had to go get a back operation because his back was hurting. And I was trying to explain to him that he needs to eat differently and his back wouldn't hurt. And he's, I can't afford that kind of food. Get out of here. And so I thought, okay, they don't like me anymore. And it must have to do with all these problems that have been going on with the dog. And that festered. And I was like, oh, I didn't do anything. I don't know what, you know how you do in your mind, you're thinking about the neighbor and you have you're angry at the neighbor. And it's like, well, you're going over it in your mind and you're bringing up images in your mind about some individual that you think hates you, right? You think they don't like you. So you have this image that they don't like you. And I didn't really grasp the significance of that. And, buddy, it came back to bite me. And this is what karma is. You know, our bodies are temples. We're the temple of the living deity. And the temple is holy. I'm telling you, it is a holy place. It had nothing to do with any man-made building on earth. And the Bible says that. Make your temple with stone that are not hewn by man. Well, that means it's not created by humans. And the only thing that was not created by humans is is that which is made or manifested by our divine mind, by deity, the natural way that things are. We're not supposed to make anything holy other than that which is holy, which is the truth, which is nature, which is the beautiful paradise that we live in our bodies. They're holy. And so if you eat poison, friends, I'm telling you, will come back. You say, I can eat a little this and I can eat a little that. It don't hurt me. And then 5 years later, you got back troubles all the time. You don't know why. Your body is holy. It is a holy temple. And some parts of your body are even more holy, right? So we talked the other day about you got to have plenty of water. And then we talked about having plenty of air. Guess what? You know what's higher than the air? The light. So water is so necessary. They say 70% of your body is made of water and all of this. Well, guess what your water's made out of? Air. And as we said, it's about 90%, 95, 99% of your body's made out of air. But throughout all of that air and water and matter, it's all light. Your entire body. And friends, if you are working in an office where you don't get any sunlight for 8, 9, 10 hours a day, and then you go home and shut yourself into a living room and the shades are all down, you're watching television or something in the den, it's all dark, or in a bedroom, spend 8, 9 hours sleeping in a room where it's all dark because you don't want to be awakened by the light. So now you're 8, 9 hours, 10 hours at the office, no light, 8, 9, 10 hours in your bedroom, no light, several hours in front of the television. The only time you ever get any light is when you go outside to get your car, to go to work, or go to the grocery market. You get light, what, an hour a day? You need light all day long. This is why living in houses is a sin. But I digress. Here's how it came back to bite me. And it wasn't the guy's fault. Now, I'm not blaming him. He didn't do anything wrong. He probably wasn't even mad at me. But it was me that thought he was mad at me, and he hadn't come around for a while. I think he was a little upset at me or something. I don't think his wife was too happy with me from things that she'd been hearing about my dogs or something. I don't know. But this was all going on in my own mind. Because when I went there, she wouldn't come out of the house, and he just came up to didn't invite me out for coffee or anything, which I didn't expect him to do, but didn't sit and chat with me, but kind of met me at the door and just like, but just kind of met me at my truck window and basically said, we're not interested, like I was a Jehovah's Witnesses trying to sell him some literature or something. And I felt it. So I had this in the back of my mind all this time. And what I was doing by thinking that about him, what I should have done was forgiven him, or immediately stop thinking about it. Stop dwelling on anything negative. There's a scripture that says, you shall not have aught against your brother, or have something against him. And if there is something that you have against your brother, you should not let the sun go down before you go over there and talk to him and say, this is what's bothering me. And straighten it out and never let the sun go down on any negative thing. And it's over. You never have negative things. Anything that's bothering you, anything that you are worried about or you're upset with someone about. And you just keep bringing that thought up in your mind. Because that negative thought is creating a situation. So a few weeks, months go by. Yeah, some months. And here I am, la, 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 going down the road. And coincidence, my higher mind says, we're going to give you a test today, brother. And like, what? See, I'm not aware of this is what's going on because this is my higher conscious mind bringing the lessons into the world. I am bringing my own lessons. I judge myself and I bring my own lessons. And until I realize I'm in control and I don't need to be afraid or have anxiousness or negativity, until I realize that my body's a temple of the living deity and nothing bad can never come into this body, or else I've defiled my temple. And when you defile your temple, yeah, the lower ego gets angry, starts punishing you, right? Fear dwells up, hate, jealousy, and bam, you start imaging evil, wicked scenarios, and bam, it happens. Starts in your dreams, you see nightmares, you know that something bad's coming in your life. You got to find these things. When people do something to you, something's going on negative, you got to erase it, forgive it, make it null, make it void, or else it's going to come back. That's karma. You got to get rid of your karma. And guys, I don't think any of us are going anywhere and moving on or graduate until we get rid of all of our karma, because our karma is what we're going to have to pay and be judged for. We don't have karma, then we're free to live in perfect peace and happiness. No more troubles. To get rid of all your troubles, you got to get rid of all this karma, meaning nothing can be your fault. Doesn't mean you can't make mistakes. It means you can't hold a grudge or not forgive everyone. And once we get to the place where we've, through love, cast out all fear, through truth, we become free, and through gnosis, we've gotten wisdom, we're not moving on to the next place. And so here I am, just opened my truck door. Here comes my neighbor, and he says, I'd love to help you, but we're on our way to town, and my wife has got to get to the doctor for a doctor's appointment, and we're late. So we ain't got time. Just put 5 minutes and just put a chain and, and just pull you a little bit and get you out. We ain't got 5-10 minutes here. We're late. So we got to go. Very sorry. And I said, you know what? No worry, brother. I'll figure a way to get out of this. Have a blessed day and hope everything goes well at the doctor. And they went on by. And then I started thinking, you know what? What a coincidence that I even got into this situation in the first place. The next morning, I am greeted by the neighbor that I've been thinking all these negative things about. And boom, the universe gave me a situation where, and like I say, it wasn't their fault. I think that what they did was correct, right? His wife needed to get to the doctor, and it was an appointment, and they didn't want to be late. Look, that was probably the right thing to do. If my wife needed to get to a doctor, I'd be getting on down the road. I wouldn't worry about somebody stuck on the road. So I'm not mad at them. But what I'm saying is the universe gave me that situation. That universe popped that up in my dream. And I had to live that and experience that. I could have gotten out 10 minutes. Boom, I would have been out of there. All he had to do was get his chain, put on his, give me a little tug, and I would have gotten right out. But because I created that scenario, these scenarios just keep coming. When you think negative things, those thoughts are going to manifest in the future. You got to get rid of them. But, everything's that way. Your diet is that way. Like I said, if you get anything in your body that doesn't belong there, there's going to be some effect, depending on how bad that poison is. Your body is it's like a car. It has an air filter. And the air filter will work as long as you're not in some extreme circumstance and keep all the air going into your manifold clean. But if the filter becomes plugged and you don't regularly clean it and put a new filter on, change your oil, do things like that, well, your car's going to get damaged. So it's good to do maintenance on your vehicle. It's also wise to understand the reasons why things happen. So as we've been talking about diet, a lot of people have this mindset that they know that chips aren't really good for them. Potato chips with salt and preservatives, or especially like Pringles, not even potato chip, right? But some of these other weird things that they're making now. Oh, it's made from, boiled in olive oil or something. It's okay. So it's still a burnt potato with preservatives in it. Oh, it's organic potatoes, right? Charred to a crisp with preservatives all over it. Or, oh, this is non-genetically modified. Of course, they didn't say it's organic, so it's still got all the glyphosate all over it. Things like that. We're being fooled. And we think, well, it ain't enough to really hurt you. In other words, it's poison and it won't kill you. And you won't necessarily feel it for a few weeks unless you do it every day. But you're going to live a long time. So you keep eating chips every week and you're building up these. What you're doing is you're stripping your gut of the biology of the bacteria that you need, the good bacteria. And when the good bacteria go away, then the bad bacteria comes up. See, it's a little bit like making wine. You put a certain kind of yeast and it makes wine. But if you don't put any yeast in it and you leave the top of the jug open and a spore or some other bacteria gets in there, that will then create, instead of a fermenting effect that will produce your alcohol that you're desirous of receiving, that you're trying to do, it's going to basically make it sour and turn it rotten. So this is what's going on in your stomach. And when people talk about bacteria, they only talk about bacteria from a scientific point of view, which is devoid of understanding. They don't really understand what they're talking about, so they don't explain it so that you understand it. They use this lingo, right? Good bacteria, bad bacteria, like, well, you need some bacteria, but they don't know why. Because without the good bacteria, you're not building, fermenting, and fermentation makes certain things into alcohol. But in other things, it makes it into the parts or the necessary ingredients for your life. So you say, yeah, but I can eat some bad food once in a while. Okay, if you want to have a sour gut that is not digesting and therefore you're not getting any absorption of nutrients. And in not only that, you don't need to have proteins and nutrients every day. Maybe you could fast for a few days. The problem is, instead of the nutrients, now you're getting poisons. From where? From your own gut. The food's becoming poison, sour, rotten, putrefied. Now your liver can handle it if you only do it once in a while. It's a built-in method of healing in your body, because if something happens by accident, you accidentally get some food that's spoiled, or you accidentally ate something that had bacteria that are bad bacteria, then your body can detox, solve the situation, and your liver will filter it and no problemo. However, if your entire gut has turned to sour puke, your liver can't handle that. You're constantly in a state of this pukeness. Your liver is wearing out, plus you're over drinking. Your liver can only process so much alcohol a day, like one shot an hour or something. So if you drank more than 3 shots in a night, your liver's overworking. And this means it's not absorbing other nutrients because it can't handle anything. And other poisons are getting through into your bloodstream. You're getting dizzy and weak and tired. And you're lying around. You're not getting those blood vessels made. Another little point, when I was out there working, digging under my car, trying to get out at first before I got to come along and pull myself out, I overworked shoveling there because I had to go down the road just a little bit and fill up this bag I had with sand. I thought if I put sand under the tires, I'd be able to get some traction. Well, I filled that whole bag of sand up. Well, it was a big 50-pound dog food bag, and I had the whole thing full of sand. So it was probably, I don't know how many pounds was in there. It was like over 100 pounds, I guess. Maybe it was more than that, because the whole 50-pound bag of what would have been dog food would have been 50 pounds. But put sand in it, it's probably, I don't know, barely enough. I couldn't almost get it on my back. I couldn't carry it. I had to carry it on my back. It was that heavy. And it was all I could do, just get it on my back. And I walked up this hill, not, like 100 yards up this hill with this sand on my back. And I was just so tired I wanted to stop. But I made it all the way up. My legs were like, oh, please get this off my back. I threw it off my back, and then I shoveled it under the tires, worked and shoveled, and I could feel my muscles in my chest and my body tingling. I had worked beyond what I should have. I exhausted my muscles, And all these, I could feel the blood moving and these little tingling sensations, energy tingles throughout my body. And I thought, I think this is what I was talking about the other day. That your body, when you work and you exercise, little blood vessels start being created inside of your muscles and giving life and oxygen so it can burn and bring the proteins and build. And so you've got to have these blood vessels throughout your muscles to build up muscle. And this also repairs your heart. They have blood vessels. You have your liver. All this needs blood. So I was talking about how you need exercise. And a lot of people walk and their legs are fine, but they don't do any upper body. And when you're shoveling, man, that gets the upper body going. And I could literally feel the tingling everywhere. And I thought, boy, I could feel the little kind of electrical sensations going through my body, like internally. I felt this tingling in my muscles. I pictured it as little electrical impulses, sending radiating pulses through my muscle flesh, and makes a connection between two minerals somewhere in your cells. Because like I said, each cell is a conduit, starting from the air all the way down to the solid. That's what every cell is a chain of the elemental chart. And this, if there's no break in the chain, you get a flow of this current of charge or electricity. And I think that when you're working really hard, it sends signals, and you could feel them zapping, like sending electrical beams through your flesh to where you're making a channel. And then that creates a artery or a small little vein. I don't know that for certain, but that's how my mind was picturing that. I don't know that any doctor knows how the process works exactly. If they say they do, they probably don't. But that was kind of a little revelation that my mind was showing me of how those tingly sensations was your body creating pathways for the air, for the life. And your body gets more alive when you have more of these little electrical conduits running everywhere, giving your body light in all the places it needs to have electrical energy and life. And air is traveling through that. Molecules of air. So the same thing here with food. You don't eat poison. And what is poison? Well, there is such a thing as something that's just poison that causes your body to get sick immediately and you go throw up or something. But then there are things that might not even been poison to start with. But if it destroys the bacteria, if it's something that destroys good bacteria, then it's a terrible poison that slowly kills you, that rots the stuff on the inside, and you get infected. Everything that you've ever been told, like cancer or liver disease or kidney problems or bladder or any other leukemia, everything that's ever been said was a disease. It really is infection. And it's an infection starting in your gut, in your organs that aren't getting life and energy, but it's an infection of no proper bacterias that fight off bad bacterias that cause fermentation and absorption. And by the way, I've got this up on the screen. I wanted you guys to see how important it is to use a little black pepper in all of your food. And this is why. It says black pepper helps other foods get digested better by stimulating the production of hydrochloric acid in the stomach and digestive enzymes in the pancreas. Its active compound, piperine, enhances the body's ability to break down fats and proteins, can help reduce gas and bloating. How black pepper aids digestion. Stimulates stomach acid when you eat black pepper. It signals the stomach to produce more hydrochloric acid, which is crucial for breaking down proteins and other food components. Yeah, without hydrochloric acid, you're not going to break down any of your food. And so there are certain things like black pepper. Now, every culture has something like this. It could be the chili peppers. The Mexicans eat them. Wherever people have ever gone in any culture, they always had their little spices or their herbs with them. And there's a reason. And I think that if mankind didn't have onions, curry, pepper, any kind of pepper, salt, and probably oregano and these kinds of herbs that ward off bad bacteria and antibacterial, antiviral, antiparasitic. These types of foods are all we have. I think there's thousands of them in the wild, wherever you go, plants that we don't use. But we've narrowed it down to these several that people use, and they just put them on their food. Pepper, black pepper is one of them. Is everybody just got to have salt and black pepper in their cupboard? Why? Because the ancestors knew that if you didn't have these kinds of phytochemicals and nutrients that come from plants and herbs for the healing of the body, you'd end up dying because we're not eating good food. So if we're not eating all the herbs that are in the wild, you got to at least eat the ones that our ancestors made sure they took with them on their travels and wherever they went. Black pepper for the West is a big one, and I think it's pretty prominent in all cultures. But peppers are very important. You do need to get your quality Celtic sea salt, but you need to get, because that gives you your minerals. You need those things. Like I said the other day, high up on the chart, up there in the air, right below air, you get to salt, sodium chloride, and phosphorus, and potassium. These are very necessary. The body, out of all the minerals, your body needs potassium because it's right up there on the elemental chart that our body needs in abundance. But the one thing that you can't get in food is sodium and chloride. It won't bind to any compounds that make plants. So that's why it keeps going down through the water in the soil and goes down through the creeks and all goes down to the ocean. And the ocean gets saltier and saltier because chloride and sodium will not bind to any compounds in plants. That's why you got to go to the ocean or to the salt flats and scrape that salt up and put it on your food yourself to taste. Isn't the Lord wonderful? But make sure you put your black pepper on it as well, guys. But there's another thing I wanted to tell you about. This is crazy. I don't know if you guys remember where I probably mentioned this a couple of times. There was a woman named Ruth Vose. And this lady, back in, I think she lived in the Boston area. And when Joseph Smith was early on, he was very young, he had just written the Book of Mormon, and they didn't have the money to publish the Book of Mormon. They weren't a big thing yet. It was just a few family members that kind of believed that Joseph Smith was a prophet. There wasn't a bunch of people, thousands of people coming to see the prophet at this time. So it was kind of a brand new thing. His family knew about the Book of Mormon. They were translating it and so forth. And there were a few people that were going out and telling people about the Book of Mormon. And there was a young woman named Ruth Vose that got interested in Joseph Smith and what he was teaching and the miracles and things he was doing. And she wanted to join and help out where she could. And they didn't have the money to publish the Book of Mormon. So she financed the publishing of the Book of Mormon. Her name was Ruth Vose. And I thought, well, my goodness, all the Voses in Boston, New York, and that area around there, they all arrived from one man, Robert Vose. Robert Vose had a son named Thomas Vose, and everybody is related to Robert and Thomas there that are Voses in that area. New York has a huge art gallery called Vose's Art Gallery. It's a huge, famous art gallery. And it seems like a lot of Voses were painters. My dad was a painter. I do like to paint. But I knew that she was related, and very likely was either my great, 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 great grandmother, or perhaps my great, great, great grandmother's sister, or my great, 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 great grandfather's aunt, or something. But I knew that she was related. But I never really knew. And there was a dear sister that's recently done my genealogy all the way back to, I guess, Adam, basically, and literally all the way back to Jesus and Mary Magdalene for sure. And I do also have a Sinclair lineage, which is, of course, probably the biggest line, that and the Vose line, that goes back to Mary Magdalene and Jesus Christ. And then once you get to Jesus, you can go all the way back to Adam. Of course, Jesus' line goes back to Adam several ways. But I wondered, just curious, is it possible? Because the crazy thing about it is that the Mormons believe today, modern Mormons believe, that this woman was one of Joseph Smith's wives. Well, I don't believe that because I know that Joseph Smith wasn't a polygamist. The Lord has shown that to me. I know beyond a doubt that Joseph Smith, if you think he was a prophet, you'd have to assume he wasn't a liar or a perjurer or a polygamist, right? Joseph Smith said in his writings, all of his scriptural writings that came from him tell you in no uncertain terms that polygamy is wrong and you should only have one wife. Of course, Brigham Young came in from the Cochranite groups, which were polygamists. And right at that moment, Joseph Smith dies. And it's all recorded history. They tried to get Joseph Smith to do it, and he said no. He refused and said that Brigham Young was going to lead the church to hell. And then they immediately came and put him in jail and then martyred him. He predicted his death. In August of 1842, Joseph Smith said, and I quote, "My feelings at the present time are that inasmuch as the Lord Almighty has preserved me until today, he will continue to preserve me by the united faith and prayers of the saints until I have fully accomplished my mission in this life, and so firmly established the dispensation of the fullness of the priesthood in the last days, that all the powers of earth and hell can never prevail against it." And then in October of 1843, he said, "I defy all the world to destroy the work of deity, and I prophesy that they will never have the power to kill me till my work is accomplished, and I am ready to die." And in May 1844, he said, "Deity will always protect me until my mission is fulfilled." June 1844, the prophet Joseph Smith said, "I do not regard my own life. I am ready to be offered a sacrifice for this people. For what can our enemies do? Only kill the body, and their power is then at an end. Stand firm, my friends. Never flinch. Do not seek to save your lives, for he that is afraid to die for the truth will lose eternal life. Hold out to the end, and we shall be resurrected and become like gods, and reign in the celestial kingdoms, principalities, and eternal dominions." And then, just before he died, on his way to his martyrdom, he said, "I'm going like a lamb to the slaughter, but I am as calm as a summer's morning. I have a conscience void of an offense toward deity and toward all men. If they take my life, I shall die an innocent man, and my blood shall cry from the ground for vengeance. And it shall be said of me, he was murdered in cold blood." I think that's a beautiful prophecy. But I wondered about this Ruth Vose because Mormons today think that he was married to her. Well, she was actually married or supposedly sealed to Brigham Young. And it's interesting that most of these supposed wives that Joseph Smith had were all wives of Brigham Young. He was a Cochranite and was a polygamist before he even got there. And we can show where he admitted he's the one who invented the whole thing and that Joseph Smith was against it. But it was Brigham Young's whole thing because he was bringing the Cochranite doctrine from over in the area around Vermont or something, or Massachusetts, where these Cochranites were. And he was in that area before he came and became a Mormon. And Joseph Smith denied being a polygamist and swore on a Bible that he was not a polygamist. His family, his wife, his children said he was not a polygamist. There were no other women ever. It was written in the scriptures. There is not supposed to be any other wife but one. So I always knew this was wrong, but still I was curious about this woman, Ruth Vose. Was she related to me? Was it my great-great-grandmother or great-great-aunt that perhaps was the woman that financed the Book of Mormon? So I looked it up, and this is what I found. The consensus of the scholars. You know, what AI has to say about this. It says, the woman you're asking about was Ruth Vose. Oh, that's interesting, because my dad's sister was Ruth Ann. My dear Aunt Ruth. We called her Ruthie. The woman you're asking about was Ruth Vose Sayers. She was from the Boston area. She joined Joseph Smith and was sealed to him for eternity, though her husband was still living at the time. While the extent of her financial contribution is not detailed in the provided sources, historical documents mention her and her husband's friendly relationship with Joseph Smith. Name, Ruth Vose Sayers. So her maiden name was Vose, and her husband was Sayers. Origin, Boston area. Affiliation, joined Joseph Smith and was sealed to him in plural marriage. Well, that's how Brigham Young developed this idea. We do not know what this was about, but after Joseph Smith died, this woman was sealed to Brigham Young and was one of his wives. And my contention has been for some time that Joseph Smith was never a polygamist. He denied it with his hand on the Bible. And his wife and his children denied that there were ever any other women. And there has never been any documented children born to anyone who said that Joseph Smith was the father. And Joseph Smith never said anything about plural marriage or had any doctrines about plural marriage. But of course, because Joseph Smith wouldn't accept plural marriage, he condemned plural marriage while he was alive and condemned Brigham Young for it, by the way. And there's a lot you could look up and do some research and see this. However, there was a woman named Ruth Vose that went with him and financed the Book of Mormon, because they didn't have the money to publish the Book of Mormon. Now think about it. They didn't have any money. They couldn't finance the Book of Mormon. It was probably a few $100 or a few thousand or whatever it was. And so since they say they don't know how much she gave, well, we do know it was enough to finance the publishing of the Book of Mormon. So because of this woman, Ruth Vose, the Book of Mormon was published. And she was very friendly with Joseph Smith, including her husband. Now, I think that perhaps this idea of plural marriage that Brigham Young came up with so he could have all these women, and he even took all these women and claimed they were Joseph Smith's women, so that would make it look like it was all right, right? Take their widows from Joseph. But I think that there was something going on before Brigham Young, and it was something called a sealing. It wasn't marriage, but it was a sealing. And it probably has to do with lineages and kings. The same thing that Solomon did. He married 1,000 wives. He may have slept with some of them and produced lineages that would reign in different parts of the world. So that through the lineage of King David and Solomon, all the kings of all the nations, including Nebuchadnezzar, that the rabbis say was the son of Solomon and Queen of Sheba. So there could have been some strictly Arios Gamos things going on, which if you look back in the ancient religion temples of the nations and the Arios Gamos, it does appear that the king would have relations with his wife, and there were certain times where certain individuals were brought in to the virgin, and maybe, since the king was called the deity, it was his title, then the children born were sons of God, right? And there were certain branches. In fact, Daniel was of the line of Judah. So was Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Well, so people say, oh, Daniel was Jewish. Well, yeah, he was the son of David, and David was of Jesse of Ephratah, which is Ephraim, because remember the Levirate marriage that Judah, or Boaz from Judah, performed to raise up children for who? Joseph, whose wife was a Canaanite, Abimelech, that Abraham made the eternal covenant with. All the messiahs came from the woman's seed, which was a Canaanite woman. But we've gone into all of this, and we can't go into it here, but there is something called the Arios Gamos. It is a type of marriage, a union. The women that were involved didn't stay with Solomon. They went back to their countries with their child. Now, look, I don't know the morality or the extent of any of this, or even if what I'm saying is exactly correct, because nobody knows or understands what the Arios Gamos was. But according to the Mormons, Joseph Smith was married and had perhaps sex with this Ruth Vose. I don't know that, but let me show you something. After we read this, spousal status, her husband, Edward Sayers, was alive and friendly toward Joseph Smith throughout his life. Marriage details. The marriage to Joseph Smith was for eternity only, with no conjugal relations on earth, according to historical records. Well, let me show you something. So I asked AI, what was the first name of a woman whose last name was Vose, who was from Boston area and joined Joseph Smith and helped finance the prophet Joseph Smith, and is said to be one of Joseph Smith's wives. The woman was Ruth Vose, also known as Ruth Daggett Vose Sayers. Background: Ruth Vose was born in Watertown, Massachusetts, near Boston, in 1808. She was baptized in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints by Brigham Young in Boston in August of 1836. Connection to Joseph Smith. She and her husband, Edward Sayers, moved to Nauvoo, Illinois. Edward Sayers was not a church member, but remained friendly to Joseph Smith. The Sayers family was well off, and Edward purchased land from Joseph and Emma Smith, plural wife. Ruth Vose was sealed to Joseph Smith as a plural wife in February of 1843. The sealing was for eternity only, meaning the union was considered valid in the afterlife, but did not involve conjugal relations during her earthly life. She was continued to live with her husband, Edward. Financial help. Her husband, Edward, was a wealthy horticulturalist and florist, and his financial means likely contributed to the support of the church or specific land purchases involving Joseph Smith, which aligns with the details in your query about help finance the prophet Joseph Smith. So I said, was Ruth Vose related to Ebenezer Vose, Robert Vose, or Thomas Vose in Massachusetts area, my ancestors? They say, yes, Ruth Daggett Vose was related to Robert and Thomas Vose, who are likely your ancestors if your family is from that area. Robert Vose immigrated from Lancashire, England, to the Massachusetts Bay Colony, Dorchester, later Milton, before 1654, and is considered the progenitor of this prominent New England Vose family line. Thomas Vose was Robert's son. Ruth Daggett Vose was born in Watertown, Massachusetts, and her father was Mark N. Vose, a direct descendant of the same Vose family that settled in Massachusetts. Ebenezer Vose is also a common name within this extensive Vose genealogy, with records showing several individuals with that name, including an Ebenezer Vose Sr. from Maine, which was part of Massachusetts at that time. That Ebenezer Vose Sr. is my great-great-great-great-grandfather. And I'll show you how I know this here in a moment. It is highly probable that your specific ancestors and Ruth Vose share common lineage tracing back to the early Massachusetts settlers, Robert and Thomas Vose. Could Ruth Vose be a great-great-great-great-grandma of mine? Whether Ruth Vose could be your great-great-great-great-grandmother depends entirely on your specific lineage and which branch of the family you are descended from. If you are a direct descendant of Ruth Vose's line, Ruth Vose and her husband Edward Sayers did not have any children together during their lives. However, if she had children through a prior marriage or after Edward's death, which is unlikely, as she died in 1890 at the age of 82, or through a different path entirely, like if she was married to Joseph Smith, then it would be possible. If you are a descendant of her siblings' lines, Ebenezer Vose's line, it is highly likely that she is a distant relative, a great aunt of an ancestor of yours, as you share common ancestors in Robert and Thomas Vose. So, now mind you, I have my entire genealogy, all the way back to Adam. And a dear sister that watches my videos has done the genealogy of our shared genealogy all the way back to Adam, basically, way back to Jesus Christ. So, but I write here, in my genealogy, a Marcus Vose was born in 1803. Arethusa was born in 1807. Now remember, Ruth Vose, the woman that supposedly was sealed in a ceremony to Joseph Smith and financed the publication of the Book of Mormon, a Ruth Vose, was born in 1808. Her father was Mark Vose. So I'm like, wait a minute. Mark Vose was born in 1803. Marcus. And Ruth's father was Mark. But he had to have been at least 15, 20 years old before he could have a baby. So this doesn't fit. But I thought, well, maybe this Mark was a son of a Mark. But I couldn't find it in my genealogy. So I just asked the question, in my genealogy, a Marcus Vose was born in 1803. And I thought, well, here's a Arethusa. And that sounds a little bit like Ruth, who was born in 1808. But this Arethusa was born in 1807. And I thought, well, maybe that's her. And then Alexander Vose was born in 1808, the same year that supposedly Ruth Vose was born. When you said Ruth was born from Ebenezer Vose and Nancy Lermand, could Arethusa be Ruth? And they said no. Arethusa is not the name Ruth, and it appears there may have been a mix-up in the genealogy details regarding Ruth's father and birth information. Ebenezer Vose and Nancy Lermand did have a son named Ebenezer Jr., both in 1810. Yes, he was a twin. Ebenezer Jr. was a twin of somebody else, I forget now. But yeah, they were the children of Ebenezer. But they did not have a daughter named Ruth, who was the plural wife of Joseph Smith. The woman who was Joseph Smith's plural wife was Ruth Daggett Vose, sometimes found as Ruth Daggett Vose Sayers, daughter of Mark And I thought, Marcus? Mark N. Vose and Sarah Sally Conant. Well, that's weird. Conant. My mother's maiden name is McConaughey. Both comes from the Irish con, which goes back to the lineage of Jesus Christ as well. Born in 1808 in Watertown, Massachusetts. So I wrote, there's an Ebenezer. It was born like 1790 or something, who had in 1807 this Arutha and an Ebenezer Jr. And that's Ebenezer's my great grandfather. So I said, did Ebenezer Sr., born late 1700s, who begat Arthusa 1807, and Ebenezer Jr., have any sisters who could have had a daughter named Ruth? And look what they said. Ebenezer Daggett Sr., born 1700s, had several sisters. Okay, remember this Ruth Vose that financed the Book of Mormon was named Ruth Daggett Vose. So now I'm just about certain that Ruth was a daughter of Ebenezer Daggett Sr., my great grandfather. I don't have proof of this, except that I don't know where you would get this word Daggett, Ebenezer Daggett Sr., because look what it says. The specific Ebenezer Daggett you're referring to, the father of Aruthusa in 1807 and Ebenezer Jr. in 1807, 1831, appears to be Ebenezer Daggett, born in 1763. Ebenezer Daggett is my great grandfather. And this Ebenezer Daggett had the following sisters: Marcy, which is really the name Mary, Marseille, right? Marseille, France. And Hannah Daggett. Given the prevalence of biblical names like Ruth in families of that era and region, it is possible that one of these sisters had a daughter with that name. Okay, I don't need to know about the sister now. I know then that Ebenezer was the Daggett, because Ebenezer, his name was Vose, Ebenezer Vose. It must have been Ebenezer Daggett Vose. Now, I don't know. This is what is getting me. My grandfather, Ebenezer Vose, was not Ebenezer Daggett. He was Ebenezer Vose. However, he had these kids named Arutha, as you see up here. Let's see. They say Ebenezer Daggett. The specific Ebenezer Daggett you're referring to, the father of Arthusa and Ebenezer Jr., appears to be Ebenezer Daggett. Well, the genealogy that I have says that it's Ebenezer Vose. And Ruth Daggett had the last name Vose, Ruth Daggett Vose. So, like, this guy's name is Daggett, Ebenezer Daggett, but he had the same kids. His children were Arthusa and Ebenezer Jr. Now, that can't be a coincidence, because how many kids are named Aruthusa and born in 1807? So this Ebenezer Daggett is really Ebenezer Vose. So something's getting turned around here. We've got an Ebenezer Daggett that gave birth to these two kids, Aruthusa and Ebenezer. And we've got a Ebenezer Vose that gave birth to them all at the same year. So Ebenezer Daggett is Ebenezer Vose, but I don't know why there's a Daggett and a Vose. What it might be is that Ebenezer's name was Daggett, but maybe his wife or his mother was a Vose, because she married into a Vose. But it was Ebenezer Daggett that gave birth to Ruth Daggett Vose. And so I wrote, but both Ebenezer Vose and Ebenezer Daggett had daughters named Arthusa born in 1807 and an Ebenezer Jr. in 1808. And they write, it seems you have identified a genealogical puzzle with the shared names and birth years. But they can't give me an answer, and they just say, well, that's just a puzzle. Don't worry about that little mix-up because nobody knows, right? Well, that's interesting to me. So this is why I asked down here. Was Daggett Ebenezer's last name? Yes, Daggett was Ebenezer's surname, last name. The individual you're referring to are part of the prominent Daggett family in line New England history. Ebenezer Daggett Sr. was a recognized individual in his community, serving in public office for many years, and is consistently referred to in historical and genealogical records with the surname Daggett. So I wrote, this Daggett gave birth to Ruth Daggett Vose, ? No, Ruth Daggett Vose was not the biological daughter of Ebenezer Daggett. Her full name was Ruth Daggett Vose, where Daggett was a middle name or a prominent family name, not her surname or at birth. Her parents were Mark Vose. Well, remember, Ebenezer Vose gave birth to Marcus. And so there's something screwed up here because they're saying that Ruth Vose wasn't born from Ebenezer Daggett. But where'd she get the Daggett, the middle name? You see, her full name was Ruth Daggett Vose. And Ebenezer Daggett had a daughter, Aruthusa, in the very year that Ruth was born. But Aruthusa's dad was Ebenezer Vose, and this Ruth was Ruth Daggett Vose. And her father was an Ebenezer Daggett. So I don't know what's going on here. I can't figure this out, but in my opinion, it is possible that Ruth was my great-great-great-great-great-grandmother. There is something here that I'm going to try and untangle, and I haven't done it yet, but I think it's very interesting. But guys, even if she is my great-great-great-grandmother, this doesn't mean anything about my connection to Joseph Smith, except that my great-great-great-great-grandmother financed the Book of Mormon and was supposedly sealed to Joseph Smith in some eternal Ariel's Gamos. But it's just interesting, isn't it? But anyway, yeah, we're over an hour, so I'm going to go ahead and leave it there, guys. Oh, it's a beautiful day. Well, I'm going to get up and try to get this loaded and eat some more of this soup I made. This is good soup. Man, you got to make a soup with a roux, guys. That's how you do it. Oh, and white pepper and a bay leaf, always. Guys, it's so good. Broccoli, and I got potato and onion and broccoli, and it's delicious. Other stuff in there, too. We'll see you guys tomorrow. You know the Lord loves you all. His grace and His peace will be with you. And we'll see you here. Same bad channel, same bad time tomorrow. Have a good one.